we are going to celebrate two of our other authors, Anastasia Vassos and Miriam O'Neill. Then there will be another short break, and there is cake because it is Christine's birthday. That's what we'll do after Miriam, and then we'll come back and there will be the Fly Cotton series. We'll have our readers from that series. So thank you all for coming and for having such a wonderful Nixes May evening. So, first up, Anastasia Vassos is the author of Nike Adjusting Her Sandal, Nixes May 2021. It's on the table back there. Her chapbook, Nosos, was published by Kelsey Books in 2023. Her poems appear in Thrush, Swim, Rhino, Whale Road Review, and elsewhere. She is a Best of the Net finalist and a Pushcart Prize nominee. She speaks 3 languages and lives in Boston, in my neighborhood, in Roslindale. So please welcome Anastasia.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming. I'm a little overwhelmed sort of listening to your work, and I know so much what you mean about, I write about my mother quite a bit. It's like, when am I going to stop writing about my mother? And it's like, maybe never, right? Maybe never. Anyways, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Nixes May. And I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm going to be reading from Nike, Adjusting Her Sandal. Thessaloniki, 4 a.m. Here they dance with arms raised above their heads, the middle of the body suspended like a question. They bend their knees as their feet describe the arc of some forgotten journey. I've been up all night drinking ouzo. My plane leaves in an hour. The rebetika pulses in my veins. I have an exquisite headache. I'm in love with the city of dusty streets and ancient churches. For now, it is I on this empty road, the car radio, my only cohort. Metallic strains of bouzouki seep through the air like thick smoke of a Gauloise cigarette. Even the sardine fishermen sleep. The heat has begun to settle a blanket. When the sun comes up, I'll be gone. 3,000 ancestors ask how I straddle the sea afoot on either shore. I peer through the windshield at Orion's belt in search of home. The 3 stars, the 3 sisters are the stars that shine in the middle. I race through the dark, speaking in tongues. The Greeks have many islands, and they have 2 names for some of the islands. So for example, Mytilene, we know as the island of Lesbos, and Santorini, the Greeks call Thera. And the myth about Santorini, Thera, is that it's the lost island of Atlantis. On Thera, on this white island ringed in blue and dust, we climb ghost steps leading up out of the cauldron. You and I are Greeks today, pretending we're on the surface of the moon. A widow dressed in black guards the church. Here at the edge of the Aegean, she tells us there's more wine than water, more churches than houses, more donkeys than people. Feed me a country that curves rogue waves round its edge, then returns them. I thirst, I hunger, baffled crater, caldera, calvaria. Language laces my Greek tongue with the lips of a Spaniard. We're at the hem of the volcano. I lift my dress, the breeze on my legs. Prodigal daughter. He stood, poured his tea from one cup to another to cool so he could drink it before he walked to the corner of the street to catch a bus that took him to the train, to walk another block, to catch another bus, and then walk to his store so that my sister and I could go to college. I paid my father back by telling him I didn't believe in God. That was the summer I memorized Yeats as I rode the train to work in town. I stared at the outlines of trees against the sky's coat. He called me princess. He faltered into the chair next to the phone on the wall. He said, "That's a sin, you know," and I, in my know-it-allness with my college education, was indifferent until my mother told me he had wept. I had been thinking about Petrarch's sonnets and that I had run out of cigarettes. The great Greek poet Cavafy lived in Egypt, in Alexandria, and this is a poem about, well, he's featured in this poem. Towards the end, there's a word called idoni, which in Greek, well, it's the root of the word hedonistic, and so it means pleasure. Alexandria. Cavafy, you walked here, the vision of your last lover up ahead, out of reach. Ancestor, you wandered alone, the hot, consoling daydreams burning. If memory distilled an odor, this would be it. The sweet burr in the nostrils, streets furred with incense, the censer swinging through the street's naked corridors. Once, a library burned here. Once, there was a lighthouse here. Where the Nile brims into the Mediterranean and the waves remember their Greek, idoni rides like a tide, return. All right, moving right along. Portrait of Mother on the Greek Peninsula. The yellow ladder leaned against the white house, gleaming. The baby swallows tilted and swerved in cursive against the bluest sky. That was the summer you had the best idea, the summer you laid the hose out in the sun so we'd have hot water. On the simmering beach, you sat with your hat on your head in the doubtful shade of the rusty umbrella. You sat next to your sister on the crisp edge of the sea, watching the sea, watching my sister and me swim in the bluest sea. You sat on the shimmering beach. I swam in the bluest sea with my sister. The summer you had the best idea. We picked kumquats from trees that lined the garden like old-time Greek soldiers in layered skirts, ate kumquats while the baby swallows curled their tongues around songs. The sun was so hot, we could have melted butter on stones. We laid out the garden hose for water hot enough to wash off the salt and sand from the simmering beach. The best idea. Your hat on your head, you washed my shirt till it was whiter than white in the hottest sun, ironed my shirt to its crispest edge, as white as the house that held the yellowest ladder that leaned against it, gleaming. You were the best that summer. I remember that summer as if it were just now, like the answer to a question leaning in the doorway. One more poem, it's in 6 parts, and I just want to say it's so beautiful to be here in person with you. I feel like our writing community is so beautiful, and like, what would we do without each other, right? Diaspora. 1. The island of Tinos is home to the west wind, I learned right after Matthio's friend rented me the car and told me to hold tight to the handle when I opened the door so it wouldn't rip off or I'd have to buy a new one. The wind throws dust onto every possible surface. I park in the driveway and hold tight to the handle. 2. I'm at the age where I trust night to shift into day. Here in the pulse of morning, I measure my heartbeats with words. Boston is a wet gray bowl, far from the olive tree on my grandmother's land. She made a deal in exchange for 2 apartments and a marble foyer. A stump stands in what's left of the yard. 3. I am home and far from it. Zephyrus rushes rain into my window and slices the silence. Water pours into the ground. 4. In Thessaloniki, I visit the cemetery with my aunt to see the grave of her mother, my grandmother. We pass naked excavations that once honored sacred remains. What's left, delved among bones of the dead, are three-cornered heads of coffins exposed in dirt. There's no land, my aunt explains. After a while, we just need to make room. She's dead now, too. 5. The accents and letters of my Greek ancestors gutter in my mouth. Parakalo, Efcharisto, beginning, and Alpha, Omega. There's no end to the combinations I could make. I translate Greek to English, English to Greek, every word made up of two. Iconoclast, nostalgia, dyslexic. 6. To remind myself where I'm headed, I throw ashes at the ancestors.
That was so beautiful. I throw ashes at the ancestors. Exquisite. Our next reader is Miriam O'Neill, and Miriam O'Neill's work has appeared in the LA Review of Books, the Galway Review, North Dakota Quarterly, the Wax Lemon, and elsewhere. The Body Dialogues Lilly Poetry Review Books 2020 was nominated for Massachusetts Center of the Book Award. In her first collection, We Start with What We're Given, Kelsey Press, came out in 2018. She's also a 2019 Pushcart nominee, was a finalist for the 2019 Disquiet International Poetry Prize, and a 2020 Princemere Poetry Prize. A portion of her translation of the Italian poet Aldo Marini's Rose Volanti appeared in On the Seawall, and she hosts a fabulous monthly reading series, Poetry, the Art of Words, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and you really should check it out and get on her mailing list. Talk to her later. Her current writing projects include translating A Literary Guide to Venice, In the Footsteps of Writers, a long essay on the life of British artist Elizabeth Rivers, and her time on the Aran Islands in Galway, and a new collection of poems in the voice of Lot's wife. The most recent collection, though, The Half Said Things, was published by Nixes Mate in 2022. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you. I did all that? I do have contact information on these bookmarks, so if anybody wants to know more about the reading series for me, I have bookmarks. So I'm just grab them. Oh, thank you so much for letting me be part of this. Thank you to Gloria for this wonderful space, this venue, and to Michael and Annie for everything. Michael's beautiful design work here. And it's nice to see all these faces. I agree, this is so good to be in person with people who love poetry. So the Half Said Things, I'm just going to tell you that it has an epigraph from Colm Toibin, the novelist and poet Irish. He said, I miss the sky, the weather, the landscape, the soft look, the half-said thing. Where I'm from, the people will say very little, and you'll have to find out what happened if you want to know. It's very Irish. I'm sure it's very Italian and very Greek, and very, but in my case, it's very Irish. So I have 6 poems that I would like to share. This is called Losing Track of Love. Everywhere she goes, she's a fugitive of her own heart. A 45 on a turntable without the little disc, the size of a checker to plug the empty space. An LP would have filled with music, each song released after a brief fritch of the needle between tracks. There are no tracks. She's not on a train. No vanishing point lies somewhere out ahead. Only girls who thumb messages, the power on light blinking blue, and a strange stickiness on her wrist she can't identify the source of. Then, at Robin's call, her rambler mind pushes the door open as she reads the toad's comma curve of scat on flagstone, nothing on either side, as if a blessing written in the dark by feel has been erased. All the nocturnal creature's contributions wiped away. The vole's italic tracks, the deer's cup of firm brown periods, the fireflies illuminated thou and I. All that had been written by starlight, by way of night's fancy, by way of the sweet dream grief sometimes offers, as comfort for a fraught passage across snowy field or prairies or oceans churning. When she awakens, bones journey weary, the sticky wrists washed clean, the last comma on the stones already swept into the long grass with the knife. Read that one last. Okay. I have a series of poems in this book that all begin with the verb consider, the instruction, consider. And this one is called Consider the Lilies of the Seine. The young people's choir from Paris pours into the coffee shop, their sunlit faces more a flood of lilies than human beings. And as some chant on the satellite radio drones, they open mouths and throats and proffer harmonies. Their tourist maps of Plymouth rustling like leaves between their fingers. One lily with blonde hair to her chin accepts a deep French kiss from a red-headed lily whose arms wrap around her from behind, whose hands flutter at her ribs as she takes his kiss. Her mandarin lipstick seeps into his lips' crevices. The other lilies dancing around them seem oblivious to all that stamen and pistolness. After all, they're lilies from Paris. But the unpetaled rest of us, we sigh and wish. Here's another considered poem. I grew up in Manamet, which is the southern part of Plymouth on the coast. And on a really clear day, there are certain places on the Manamet Cliffs where if you look to the north and east, you can see all the way to Scituate. Consider the cormorant. After 3 days of rain, Scituate's cliffs straddle the horizon, the furthest slash of coastline seeable from Manamet Point. And I consider the cormorants, balanced on barnacled shoulders, the low tide has exposed, wings wide open in a tableau of flight. Black-backed, chests tufted white, orange feet spread wide, a streak of guano trailing behind. Beaks into the wind, they know how to stand as if hanging in the thermals, red crowns flittering. It's a matter of survival, this ability to balance on a chaperon rock. Sometimes life's like that. When we're paying attention, we learn that follow-through takes a while, that some days it's enough to perch in the light. It's just sometimes the weight of waters more than November's sun can disperse. We'd like to fly, but no, we have to wait. this is dedicated to my brother, Frank, also known as Paco, who was a long time in the Navy. And though we grew up in Plymouth, he had the thickest Boston accent I've ever heard. He never, it's, I don't know. This is called Accent, and it follows him. Someone complains outside of Mullen's bar in a voice that scours the ear of R. A voice that speaks ciggies and biz, like my brother Paco, 8 years in the Navy. And 20 years down south, that flat A held. The G still dropped from every participle with the minor whine of too tight adenoids, as if each word were caught in a snare of bones. I didn't think I'd miss that sound, but its scrape against my cochlea calls up the glow of streetlights, shining down on small square roofs of telephone booths, where he stood talking to our mum from Saginaw or Raleigh, and before that, how he hunched his shoulders, thumb out, trudging Route 3A at midnight, an hour's walk and 2 rides home, only cigarettes to warm him. Maybe the sound cuts deep because I saw him peel wet socks from swollen feet after the late shift, and sometimes heard that last gulp of beer come back in protest, or because so often he slept fully clothed in the den under an Afghan until noon while we moved noisily around the kitchen. Maybe because no one protected him, because they didn't know they should, because a boy in a small town shouldn't need protection from bigger boys or poisonous men. Maybe because as a kid he took hold of life with both hands, and at 60, every bone fissured by cancer, he refused to let life go. When I hear that accent, I remember what's been stirring up lately in dreams. He's telling me life's what I make it, grief or no grief. And I'll just have 2 more. I'm going to read this one because Stephen Delvos, who was kind enough to, he's our poet laureate in Plymouth, and he was kind enough to blurb my book, really likes this poem, so I'm going to read it because he likes it. It's called Rain. I miss the sweet barista with the gentle eyes who carried my coffee to me as jewels to a queen. Not subservient or humble, kind. As if a queen alone on her throne is a sad situation and coffee might help, his smile touching her. I miss the taste of a chocolate cornetto at the kitchen table of my friend who notices the queen's distraction, which will turn out to be her reign over loneliness, a land which rules me. When my friend speaks my name, I come back to this land. I miss Mama's deep, damp hand gripping my arm as we traverse La Scala, her head just above my elbow, her quavering voice making the opera live, her firm belief that the Queen understands Italian and the language of hands. We must go away to miss things and people. We must enter a foreign land alone and marry far away. So I take my missing with me like a parting gift of roses, their stems covered in thorns, their intoxicating perfume. And in the honor of the wonderful poems from Christine, I'd like to share this one. This is told to me. There's a quote in here that was actually said to me. Kinds of fire. She brings my book to the nursing home and reads my poems to her mother, who has no memories of her own. It's nice, she says. They're short, And my mother doesn't have to say anything, just listen. It seems to make her feel good, hearing the words. And I imagine brain cells aflame, synapses charging like some neuronal Pleiades, her daughter's voice a struck match as she reads the line about blue swans who stir our voices in the blue-black mud with sunset-colored feet.
They're trying to figure out what's going on, so she's actually in the emergency room today. She's here in spirit, obviously, and she sent her cake. So thank you, everybody. It's kind of cool to get serenaded. Birthday. Never too old for that, I don't think. Yay! All of ourselves. Is it carrot cake?